And a lot of companies, they think, well, oh gosh, I can't afford to include all these people in the process. And the truth is you can't afford not to. When I think about the work environment, I'm often looking at the invisible, at things that you can't see, like indoor air quality, how space feels, and how communities of all kinds of people look at space and maybe think of it a little differently than me. I've become so much more aware, and I think a lot of people in our industry have as well, of the people who aren't in the room making decisions about space. And it's really interesting, I think, when you think about who's not in the room. It's folks who are think differently, come from different backgrounds. The whole spectrum of diversity really means a lot. And I think there have been a lot of people who have not felt comfortable coming into the office in the first place because they felt uncomfortable, because of microaggressions, because of lots of things. And so the pandemic only made it worse. And they're not coming back because they feel like it was never created for them in the first place. I think one of the things that we've been talking about in the world of work for a long time is this idea of choice. And we're becoming more expansive as we think about that choice and thinking about it in ways that are more welcoming for communities that maybe hadn't felt that way before. So neurodiversity is a big one. We're all part of this big neurodiversity. We all think very differently in the world. And I think we're more aware now that we need different sorts of places to be quiet. Some people are pacers. Some people, read Braille. There are lots of different people who potentially could participate in office life. And so being just more thoughtful about who those communities of people are is really, I think, expanding our view about choice. I think the most important thing is people. That's the easy answer. It's actually the hardest answer, right? Because what is it that we need as people when we come together to do work? I think that is really getting questioned a lot. And part of this whole focus on people, it's not just supporting individuals, it's also meeting the mission of an organization and of teams. And so that balance of supporting, creating new innovation and value as teams, but also doing, supporting individuals and where they are and what they need and being supportive of their individual wants and desires. I think all that is weaving those two things together is what we're really trying to reconcile right now. One of the things that I find most important as I'm working with leaders in their organization, thinking about their work and their workplace, is getting to the center of what equity means. It's not just providing a one-size-fits-all cubicle, and they all look the same, row after row of cubicle, and hey, you get one of these. That's equity. Not really, particularly if some people live very far away from the office and commuting in takes them 2 hours each way. That's spending that time in the office isn't necessarily fair, but they're talent you want to keep. Equity around hybrid technology and collaboration. What does that look like? So, some people need to call in, some people need to be, are available and present to be in the meeting. How do we create a meeting that's equitable when clearly face-to-face the people in the room are potentially going to get more attention than those are calling in. It just hits us on so many different levels, this idea of equity. It's interesting. I was talking to a diversity, equity, inclusion leader recently, and she said, DEI, the roadmap starts with E. And I think she's right. So we've had one of the biggest shakeups, at least in the last couple of decades, with this pandemic, and it's made us rethink a lot of things. I think the biggest opportunity is the opportunity to reinvent, to actually rethink, and rethink not just the place where we do work, but rethink work itself. What could be simpler? What could be easier? What could be new and fresh that allow us to truly tap into our mind share, our smartest and best ideas. Is it working a 40-hour week? Is it working, the kind of ways that we worked in the past? Probably not. Things have changed, things are shifting, and I think for me, it's like, don't let this crisis go to waste. Let's make sure that we were thoughtful and really took pause to taking the best of the last 3 years and letting go of the things that didn't work before the last 3 years anyway. So I think there are lots of hurdles. For those of us who design workplaces, it's helping our clients make long-term real estate decisions in a very uncertain time, which comes with all sorts of complexities, right? When it comes to the clients themselves, the big hurdle that they're facing is that their people don't want to come back. And they're having to be honest that things aren't snapping back like they thought they would a few years ago. And they're really having to rethink what it means to have a workforce that's, largely remote for many folks. And I think for those of us who are leading cities, mayors, and leaders of organizations out there, they're really having to rethink how their cities are being shaped and what their campuses are going to look like in the future, because there are big holes right now of a whole workforce who's not going to be there. In terms of health and wellness, I think that the biggest challenge is that we are really focused on physical health. Sometimes organizations think about mental health because, boy, is it front and center. But there's also so many other aspects of health that are pretty holistic. And so I think that we need to have a more open view about what that means. And I would say, interestingly, too, we're starting to do a lot of research looking at, honestly, your boss impacts your health, right? The building impacts your health. But also, one of the biggest impacts of health is your zip code, just where you live or where your business is located and where those employees are coming from. So there are a lot of health factors that really are driven by, issues in the environment or other sorts of things that our buildings need to be responsive to as well. In terms of really understanding the specific needs of their workforce with regards to health, that has a lot to do, actually partnering with HR is a really great idea. So they're seeing obviously the data from the insurance perspective, of course, but also they're doing the satisfaction surveys. They're hearing directly from employees those real key issues that they don't feel comfortable coming to their boss and talking about. The real personal stuff, their inside voice, what's inside their head that they're not able to verbalize. And I think it is important to start there and then build programs, build a space, build all kinds of things that are in reaction to that. But I will say that, some of the best solutions really come from the people themselves, from individuals who have a passion around certain health or well-being issues or initiatives, and that ground up is really important too. So lean on HR, lean on, people who have passions around health and well-being, and pay attention to where a lot of your costs are as well. So when it comes to kind of the mental or emotional health of a workplace, when you walk in the door, your building sends a message, your space sends a message. It could just be, the message that's on the front door, on the logo, whatever. But, is there Braille that's part of the signage that says, oh, people with outside are welcome here? Is it that there are places where people can go and be quiet for a little while and just take a break and take a breather? Or are they really walking into a sea of cubicles and there's no relief in sight? Are there opportunities for people to collaborate in spaces and in rooms where they can move the furniture around, where they can stand up, sit down, bounce, potentially? Are there choices for them so that they're not constrained in a certain way? And I think sometimes individuals have preferences, but honestly, all of us have our days when we prefer one thing over another. And so again, that kind of being able to be sensitive to smells, to taste, to light, to all of it, kind of turning on those different perceptions that we might have walking through a space. I think it's really important to think about that. I'll be honest with you, I'm struggling with metrics. I mean, I've been in the business of measuring space for a very long time. And we've been talking about square foot per person and square foot per person served. And, experience per square foot, that's the latest, or happiness per square foot, or health per square foot, perhaps. I don't know. Is that a thing? But I think it's really ultimately the way that we measure success in the organization is outcomes related to the work that we're doing, but also how satisfied our people are. Recruiting and retention is a great measure. Tenure, how long they stick around with the organization is a big measure, actually. If somebody's willing to stick with you longer than a couple of years, probably means you're doing a couple things right. Double down on that. But I do think, it's so easy to get wrapped up into, well, what are all the things happening within this footprint? Let's make sure that we measure all of that. And it's really the people in the footprint that matter. So I think it's probably looking at whatever you measure, just don't do it from one perspective. Think about it from multiple perspectives. And consider asking that question of your CIO, of your HR person, of the DEI person in your organization, as well as your business leaders. Ask it of them, what they consider success, and then weave that into your real estate solution as well. I've been practicing workplace strategy for a couple of decades now, and the process is really good. And I really think we should double down on it. It starts with visioning. It starts with thinking about where the business is going and what's important there. And then it's really around collecting data from multiple perspectives, not just one perspective. So down, up, top, down, using, electronic data, lots of different ways of collecting data and understanding kind of the business again, but also space and what's working and not. And then there's a gap analysis, and then there's, a whole series of strategies that we might look at. And then we implement one, we pilot it, we kick the tires, we see if that's, the right direction, and then we implement. I think if there's anything that I'd change around that idea of, the traditional way of thinking about a good process, it's just to design for change from the beginning. And don't try and make it perfect. The perfect is enemy of the good, all the things. It really is important to keep change and evolution in mind. Things are changing really quickly. I mean, if you just look at leases alone, we used to have, 15-year leases, 10-year leases, 5-year leases, 3-year leases. Maybe we go with WeWork. Maybe, let's just use a room every now and again. It's like we're really struggling to commit to our space needs, I think, and for many organizations anyway. And so don't try and solve everything at once. Just keep an experimenter's view. It's okay to make space rough and a little not so precious, and to allow your teams to kick it around a little bit and use it different ways. Put things on wheels, let them change and shape it, and then make some decisions a little more long-term. So, change management. Even the name itself turns some people off, I will say, but it's a whole discipline of thinking, right? And I think that we've just been through a whole lot of change. So we do have that to our benefit, that we're building on the learnings of the massive change that we've had over the last couple of years. And as we think forward about what's next, it's really about, it's about being inclusive and making sure that we have all the right voices at the table, some which we might not have had in the past, which might include people in the community, might include people in your building that you didn't know, you might want to share some resources with, but it could be really interesting to kind of open that up. I think that idea of, thinking beyond just the point of view of a couple of people is a really good idea, and helping change that. But I think change management in general is really is really becoming one of the most important things that we can do because it's, the space, we can design it to be so beautiful and so perfect, and maybe it solves all the problems, but if people aren't using it the way that we intended it, it's a waste of money, and it's a waste of a lot of people's time. So bringing people along the whole time on our journey will help us not only make a more successful space and, to begin with, but also people will be happier. There's all kinds of research that shows the more people involved, the happy they are. And a lot of companies, they think, well, oh gosh, I can't afford to include all these people in the process. And the truth is you can't afford not to. I think we're going to be paying a lot more attention to neurodiversity, which is really, really interesting. One of the things that we've been looking at on my team is looking at the connection between neurodiversity and biodiversity, and how surprisingly there are a lot of similarities when you think about it. Biodiversity is very, very good. Having life that supports, that's very, very different and provides us as humans and as animals on the planet all kinds of wonderful things. And I think being more open and thinking about neurodiversity in the same way is really powerful, leveraging the best of all of our brains and the different ways we think coming into the room. So that's one. I think we're also really focused on learning and what that means. We've lost mentorship for the last 3 years, really meaningful mentorship of, employer and employee sitting next to each other and, working through problems together. A lot of that just impromptu learning disappeared. So we're having to make up for lost time. And we also have a situation where a lot of our baby boomers, we love them. I'm a Gen Xer. I really want the baby boomers to stay. Please stay in the workforce as long as possible, because there's a big drop. They're leaving a big hole in their wake. With the Gen Xers at basically half the size. So, there's a real gap there, and we need to continue to really fill that gap. So that's really important around learning. There's a lot of focus around carbon and climate and the circular economy. And I'm super excited about that, because what that means is really reusing things smarter from the very beginning and thinking about how, we have a lot of waste in our system. So just reducing that waste and being more thoughtful about all the investments we've made already. I love that. And I guess the last thing I'll say is that technology is amazing. If you spend any time on Chat AI, you know that there's some really cool things coming down the pike in terms of new technology. And so I'm excited about this idea of looking at a lot of what we're able to do in real life, finding ways to integrate the digital into that work experience and into the things that we make, which is really, really cool.